Too few characters out there flying around like that, saving old girls like me. Lord knows, kids like Henry need a hero.
Superheroes have come a long way from starring on the pages of comics to now starring on the silver screen. There are a lot of movies on here, so I'll briefly go through them. And there will be spoilers. The movie industry started with the monster movies, and then the westerns. And now, superhero movies. But they aren't always like this. Back in the early days of the superhero genre, superheroes were portrayed as being silly and corny. Their dialogues were pretty cringy.
I want a car. Chicks dig the car.
The first superhero movie that was ever made was titled The Adventures of Captain Marvel, which was made in 1941, which is the same character as the 2019 movie Shazam. This character was so popular at the time that his comic outsold Superman. But then there was a whole complicated lawsuit involved, and we're not going to go over this. But moving on, the first superhero TV show was called The Adventures of Superman from 1952 to 1958. Yeah, very similar titles. This was the first of many live-action adaptations of Superman. And this is the first of many adaptations of Batman. These two were the stars of DC Comics and have come a long way from how we see them today. Yes, they were silly and wacky, but things started to change once they got their own movies. In the 1978 Superman movie, which was directed by Richard Donner starring Christopher Reeve, this version showed Superman still being a little bit corny, but this movie had a lot of heart. Superman was shown as a symbol of freedom and hope. Whereas the 1989 Batman movie, directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton, showed Batman as being very dark and gloomy, much different than the Adam West portrayal of the character. The first Marvel movie was Howard the Duck in 1986.
I've got a headache.
And I got the aspirin.
And this movie was something. It was just bad. While not technically a superhero movie, Howard the Duck is a Marvel character and had a cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy.
What do you let it lick you like that for? Gross.
The 90s and early 2000s were an interesting time for superhero movies since they were very hit or miss. The Batman movie after Tim Burton fell off. And so did Superman after Superman 2.
Where is the woman?
Give it up, you'll never find her.
If you will not tell me, I will hurt people.
DC also had that Catwoman movie in 2004 where the director decided to throw the entire source material out the window. Halle Berry even won a Razzie Award for the worst actress for Catwoman.
Thank you for putting me in a piece of shit god-awful movie.
The mid-2000s helped a bit with DC movies with 2006 Superman Returns, where director Bryan Singer tries to help capture the feel of Richard Donner's Superman. Director Christopher Nolan, however, decided to entirely reboot Batman in his 2005 Dark Knight trilogy, while retaining Batman's dark side. This movie is a cinematic masterpiece, and till this day has aged very, very well. Marvel, on the other hand, had a very poor debut with Howard the Duck and the 1989 Punisher movie. And also a Captain America movie and a Fantastic Four movie that we wish didn't exist. But in 1998, Marvel released Blade, directed by Stephen Norrington, starring Wesley Snipes. And this was Marvel's first rated R movie and first black superhero before Black Panther. The Blade trilogy did well until it didn't. But then in the 2000s, Marvel started releasing more movies. They had X-Men and Spider-Man, and these movies were some of my favorite growing up. These movies were a hit to both critics and fans. But they also had many misses like Daredevil, Ghost Rider, another Punisher movie, and their first female superhero, Elektra. Unfortunately, X-Men and Spider-Man's third movie started to fall off. Also at that time, many of these characters were no longer owned by Marvel due to them going bankrupt in the 90s. But in 2008, Marvel regained their momentum with Iron Man. Iron Man was very important because it started the Marvel Cinematic Universe. DC created their universe 5 years after Marvel did, called the DC Extended Universe. The DCEU is depicted as a darker world compared to Marvel's lighter and more fun tone. The DCEU has a rough start with only 7 films at the moment. They had a couple of misses with Batman v Superman and Justice League. DC needs to give their characters a proper introduction instead of rushing them to compete with Marvel. But some of the more recent films like Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Shazam were a massive success. Aquaman and Shazam were a break from DC's dark tone and added fun into their movies, and that helped it a lot. They made a guy who talks to fishes cool and a total badass. Marvel movies did have a rough start, and people didn't really care about them until the Avengers. This was the first time we saw their heroes all in one movie. Marvel was able to connect their movies with several of their TV shows, like the Netflix originals. The Netflix shows were able to take a darker route with their lesser-known characters and made them for a more mature audience. You know a show is dark when you have trouble watching them with full brightness at nighttime. In 2016's Captain America Civil War was a big one for Marvel since it pins the Avengers against each other and introduced the third incarnation of Spider-Man. What made this movie different is because of the antagonist is the opposite team you're rooting for, and it brought up many political issues that concerns the world. DC tried to do the same thing a few months earlier but failed to do so. Into the Spider-Verse won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. This movie was based on a different Spider-Man and had a very unique art style resembling a comic book. The animation was animated in 2D to lower the frame rate and make the characters' pose more pronounced. In 2018's Avengers Infinity War was a game changer, and it shows our hero losing and the consequences of it. It was very emotional to watch many of our favorite characters get killed off by Marvel's most anticipated villain. Avengers Endgame not only wraps up Infinity War, but also their 21 previous films, and had an emotional send-offs to many of their stars. This movie is the end of the Avengers. This doesn't mean it's the end of the MCU.
We're in the endgame now.
There are many more films and TV shows that Marvel has planned, and with Disney's acquisition of Fox, Marvel can finally get back all the characters that they have lost. And for the DCEU, they have their own plans. Superhero movies have come a long way, and it looks like they're here to stay. I have high hopes for the future superhero movies, and can't wait for more to come.